The crystal chandelier overhead dripped light onto the polished marble floor, a galaxy of fractured stars shimmering beneath the feet of men in bespoke tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than a year of Chloe's rent. She moved through the glittering crowd like a ghost, a silent cog in the grand machine of the evening, her red vest a stark, cheap slash against the sea of silks and velvets. Her white shirt was starched to an uncomfortable crispness, a constant reminder of her place. Her job was simple: be invisible, be efficient, and never, ever make a mistake. But the universe had a cruel sense of irony. A sudden swerve from a guest, a careless elbow jutting from a $1,000 suit jacket, and the tray of champagne flutes in her hands tilted precariously. She managed to save all but one. The last glass, full of bubbling gold, arced through the air in a slow, horrifying ballet before splashing down the front of a woman whose diamond necklace was blinding. Silence fell in their small corner of the ballroom. The woman looked down at the dark stain blooming on her pale satin dress, then up at Chloe, her face a mask of theatrical disbelief. "Do you have any idea what this gown is worth?" she hissed, her voice low but carrying the sharp crack of a whip. "It's more than you'll make in your entire miserable life." Chloe's throat closed up. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. It was an accident." Her apology was a feather in a hurricane, lost instantly. The woman's husband, a stout man with a face flushed from drink, stepped forward. "An accident? Incompetence is what it is." Then came the voice she dreaded most. "What is going on here?" Mr. Abernathy, the event manager, materialized beside them, his face a pinched knot of fury. He didn't look at the guests. His eyes, small and cold, were fixed solely on Chloe. "I am so terribly sorry," he said, bowing slightly to the couple. "The staff is disposable. The girl will be dealt with." He grabbed Chloe's arm, his fingers digging into her skin like talons. "You are finished," he whispered, his breath sour. "Get your things and get out." Humiliation burned hotter than any shame she had ever felt, a flush of heat crawling up her neck as dozens of eyes watched her being dragged away like a common thief. They didn't see a person. They saw a stain, an inconvenience, a problem to be removed. And in that moment, Chloe believed them. Mr. Abernathy shoved her toward the service corridor, his voice a venomous hiss. "I told you, Chloe. One more mistake. This is a high-class establishment, not some back-alley diner. Our clients expect perfection." He released her arm, leaving red marks on her skin. "You are a liability." Chloe's voice was barely a whisper, thick with unshed tears. "It wasn't my fault. Someone bumped into me." She knew it was useless. In this world, the customer was a god, and she was less than a sacrifice. "Excuses," Abernathy sneered, adjusting his tie as if her presence had physically soiled him. "Go to the staff room. Wait for me there. We will discuss the damages you'll be paying for." He turned his back on her, his posture reeking of dismissal, and smoothed his way back into the glittering ballroom, a sycophant rejoining his masters. Left alone in the dim, sterile corridor, the distant sound of the orchestra felt like a mockery. This job, this humiliating, soul-crushing job, was the only thing keeping a roof over her head. It paid for the tiny apartment she shared with two other girls and the night classes she took in the desperate hope of building a different future. A future where she wasn't invisible, where an accident didn't threaten to render her homeless. A sudden hush fell over the ballroom, a subtle shift in the ambient noise that even she could detect from the hallway. The cheerful chatter dipped, the music seeming to hold its breath. Curiosity, stronger than her shame, pulled her to the edge of the doorway. She peered through the crack. All heads were turning toward the grand entrance. A man stood there, framed by the enormous oak doors. He was not tall, but he commanded the space, as if he owned the very air within it. He was Korean, with sharp, intelligent eyes that swept across the room once, assessing everything, missing nothing. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, no tie, the top button of his silk shirt undone. It was a casual choice that, on him, looked more powerful than any tuxedo. Two other men, built like mountains, stood silently behind him. The host of the gala, a real estate tycoon named Mr. Sterling, scurried toward him, his face radiating a nervous, eager smile. "Mr. Coe," Sterling said, his voice unctuous. "We are so honored. We weren't certain you would make it." The man, Mr. Coe, gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, his expression unreadable. His gaze continued its slow, deliberate sweep of the room, gliding over the faces of the city's elite with an unnerving lack of interest. And then his eyes stopped. They stopped on her. For a heartbeat, Chloe was certain she was imagining it. But there was no mistake. Across the vast, crowded room, through the forest of couture and diamonds, the most powerful man in the building was looking directly at her, the disgraced waitress hiding in a service corridor. His name was Minjun. She heard it whispered from the other staff members who had gathered near the kitchen doors, their voices a mix of awe and fear. The Coe family. Their business was in shipping, technology, logistics, at least that was the official story. The rumors painted a much darker, more intricate picture, one of power that operated in the deep shadows of the city, untouched by the laws that governed everyone else. Minjun ignored Mr. Sterling's fawning attempts at conversation and began to move through the room. A path cleared before him, as if by an invisible force. He didn't stride. He flowed, a predator moving with silent, deliberate grace. Chloe shrank back, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed to disappear, to get to the staff room as Abernathy had commanded. But she was frozen, held in place by a strange, terrifying magnetism. He was heading in her general direction, toward the bar near her station. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her feet were lead. Jessica, another waitress who had always treated Chloe with a particular brand of disdain, shot her a look of pure venom. "What are you staring at? Get back to work before you get us all fired," she hissed under her breath. But it was too late. Minjun stopped a few feet away, his attention fixed on the bar, but Chloe felt the weight of his presence, like a physical pressure. He didn't look at the bartender. Instead, he turned his head slightly, and his dark, piercing eyes met hers once more.
"Water," he said.
His voice was deep and smooth, a low rumble that cut through the noise of the party. It wasn't directed at the bartender, who was already fumbling with a bottle of expensive sparkling water. It was directed at her. Chloe swallowed hard, her training kicking in despite the fear. She grabbed a clean glass, her hands trembling slightly, and filled it from a pitcher of iced water on her service tray. She approached him, keeping her eyes downcast, her entire being focused on not spilling a single drop. She placed the glass on the bar in front of him. "Here you are, sir." He didn't reach for the glass. He just watched her. "Look at me," he said softly. It was a command, gentle yet unbreakable. Slowly, hesitantly, Chloe lifted her head. Up close, his face was even more striking, all sharp angles and controlled intensity. There were no wasted expressions, no social niceties. He was simply present. And he was looking at her as if she were the only person in the room. He wasn't looking at her uniform, or her race, or her station. He was just looking at her. And then his gaze dropped to the base of her throat, where a small, tarnished silver locket rested against her skin. It was the only piece of jewelry she owned, the only thing her father had left her. Minjun's expression didn't change, but a flicker of something, recognition, curiosity, passed through his eyes. The moment stretched, thick with an unspoken tension that made the air crackle. The entire bar area had gone quiet. Jessica was staring, her mouth slightly agape. Walter, the old, weary bartender who had seen everything, polished a glass with deliberate slowness, his eyes missing nothing. Minjun finally picked up the water, his fingers long and elegant, brushing hers for a fraction of a second. A jolt, like static electricity, shot up Chloe's arm. He took a slow sip, his gaze never leaving her face. "Thank you," he said, the words carrying a weight that felt disproportionate to the simple courtesy. He then turned and walked away, melting back into the crowd as seamlessly as he had appeared, leaving Chloe standing at the bar, feeling as though she had just been struck by lightning. The spell was broken by Abernathy's furious whisper in her ear. "What did I tell you? Are you trying to get thrown out on the street? Do not engage with the guests, especially not that guest. His face was pale with a mixture of fear and rage. He spoke to me first. Chloe defended herself, her voice shaking. I don't care, Abernathy snapped. Your job is to be furniture. Silent, useful furniture. Now get back to clearing plates. He shoved a tray into her hands and stalked off. Jessica sauntered over, a malicious smirk on her face. Looks like someone thinks she's special. Careful, Chloe. Men like that don't look at girls like you for conversation. They chew them up and spit them out. The comment was designed to hurt, to remind Chloe of her place, and it did. The brief, bewildering sense of being seen was replaced by a familiar wave of shame. Jessica was right. What was she thinking? A man like that, a world like that, it had nothing to do with her. She was a waitress, and a clumsy one at that. Determined to be invisible for the rest of the night, Chloe threw herself into her work, her movements frantic. She cleared plates, refilled glasses, and avoided eye contact with everyone. But as she was collecting discarded dishes from a table near the terrace, Jessica, carrying a tray of red wine, tripped. The entire tray of dark liquid cascaded forward, splashing not onto a guest this time, but directly onto a priceless antique tapestry hanging on the wall. Jessica let out a theatrical gasp. Oh my God. Chloe, you pushed me. All heads turned. It was a lie, a blatant, cruel lie. Chloe hadn't been within 5 feet of her, but Abernathy was there in an instant, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. You, he screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Chloe. He didn't even question it. That's it. You're fired. And I'll make sure you pay for that tapestry if it's the last thing I do. He lunged forward and grabbed her arm again, tighter this time, his knuckles white. You're coming with me. He started to drag her toward the security office, and this time, Chloe knew it was truly over. Panic seized her. This wasn't just about losing a job anymore. The cost of that tapestry would bury her in debt for the rest of her life. She struggled against Abernathy's grip, her pleas lost in the rising murmur of the crowd. I didn't do it. Please, you have to believe me. Silence. Abernathy snarled, his face inches from hers. You've been nothing but trouble since you got here. From across the room, a voice, calm and cold as steel, cut through the commotion. Let her go. Every single person, including Abernathy, froze. Minjun stood near the terrace doors, one of his guards now beside him. He hadn't raised his voice, yet the command echoed through the grand hall with the force of a thunderclap. Abernathy's head snapped toward the sound, his eyes wide with terror. He seemed to shrink in on himself, his grip on Chloe's arm loosening slightly, but not completely. Mr. Ko, he stammered. This is a staff issue. This girl has damaged hotel property. She is being dealt with. Minjun took a single, unhurried step forward. The air grew heavy, charged with a palpable sense of danger. I said, he repeated, his voice dropping even lower, impossibly quiet yet more menacing. Let her go this time. Abernathy snatched his hand away from Chloe's arm as if he'd been burned. He backed away, holding his hands up in a gesture of surrender. Chloe stumbled back, rubbing her wrist, her mind reeling. The entire room was watching, utterly silent. Mr. Sterling, the host, hurried over, his face ashen. Is there a problem, Mr. Ko? Minjun's eyes never left Abernathy. This man put his hands on her. Twice. And he accused her of something she did not do. His gaze shifted to Jessica, who visibly flinched, her face draining of all color. I believe the security cameras for this hall will show the truth of the matter. The implication was clear. He wasn't just guessing, he knew. Sterling began to sweat. Of course, Mr. Ko. Of course. Abernathy, apologize to the young lady. Immediately, Abernathy looked as if he might choke. The idea of apologizing to a waitress, to Chloe, was anathema to him. But the fear in his eyes was far greater than his pride. He turned to Chloe, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. I apologize, he mumbled, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Minjun's gaze was relentless. Not to her feet, to her face. Abernathy jerked his head up, his eyes meeting Chloe's for a brief, humiliating moment. I'm sorry, the apology was worthless, but the power shift it represented was monumental. Minjoin then looked at Chloe, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice now gentle, meant only for her. Chloe could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. She was no longer just a waitress. In the eyes of everyone present, she was something else entirely, someone under the protection of Minjun Ko. He gestured with his head toward the glass doors leading to the moonlit terrace. "Walk with me." It was an invitation that felt like a summons. Chloe glanced back at the stunned faces of her colleagues, at Abernathy's humiliated fury and Jessica's stark terror, and then followed him outside. The cool night air was a relief after the stifling heat of the ballroom. The city lights twinkled below them, a carpet of diamonds stretching to the horizon. They stood in silence for a moment, the distant sounds of the city a soothing hum. Minjun leaned against the stone balustrade, his profile sharp and defined against the night sky. "That locket," he said, his voice quiet, breaking the silence. "May I see it?" Chloe's hand instinctively went to her throat, her fingers closing around the familiar, worn silver. It was her most precious possession. Hesitantly, she unclasped the delicate chain and held it out to him. He took it gently, his fingertips brushing her palm. He didn't look at the front, with its faded floral engraving, but turned it over. On the back, almost invisible with age and wear, was a tiny, stylized carving of a dragon entwined with a tiger. His thumb traced the symbol, his expression unreadable but intense. "My father gave this to your father," he stated, not as a question, but as a fact. Chloe's breath caught in her chest. How could you know that?" Her father had been a security guard, a quiet, simple man who died in what the police had called a robbery gone wrong, nearly a decade ago. He never spoke of his past. "This symbol," Minjun explained, his eyes meeting hers, "is the seal of the Cheonma, the Sky Horse Pact. It is an old, unbreakable promise between our families. Long ago, before I was born, your father, David, saved my father's life. He was a bodyguard then, a man of incredible courage and loyalty. My father offered him anything, wealth, power, a new life. He refused it all. He said he only wanted to live a quiet life, to raise his family in peace." Minjun paused, his gaze distant, as if seeing into the past. "So my father gave him this locket. It is not just a piece of silver. It is a marker, a promise that if his bloodline ever needed aid, the Ko family would provide it, without question, without limit. It is a debt of life." Chloe stared at him, her world tilting on its axis. The simple, tarnished locket she had worn every day was a symbol of a secret history, a forgotten promise between a security guard and one of the most powerful crime families in the country. Her quiet, unassuming father was a hero in a story she never knew existed. "He died," she whispered, the old pain a fresh wound. "They said it was a robbery." Minjun's expression hardened. "It was not a robbery. He died protecting something. We never knew he had a daughter. We searched, but he had hidden you well, to keep you safe from our world. Finding you tonight, it was fate." He placed the locket back into her palm and closed her fingers around it. "The pact is now yours to claim, Chloe. The debt is owed to you." The weight of the locket in her hand suddenly felt immense, a heavy anchor to a past she couldn't comprehend and a future that terrified her. This man, this world of silent power and unspoken violence, was now inextricably linked to her. For years, she had been fighting just to survive, to be seen as more than a disposable worker. Now, she was being offered a lifeline so powerful it threatened to drown her. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A debt owed to me?" Minjun turned to face her fully, the city lights illuminating the sharp planes of his face. "It means you will never have to work in a place like this again. It means the man who humiliated you will be removed. It means you will be safe, cared for, and want for nothing. I give you my word." His offer was a fantasy, a fairy tale solution to all her problems. But a cold knot of unease tightened in her stomach. Nothing was that simple. "What do you want in return?" she asked, her voice gaining a sliver of its strength. A faint, ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The pact requires nothing in return. The debt is ours to pay. However, he paused, his gaze searching hers. Accepting it means stepping into my world. A world that is not always safe. I can give you a quiet life, far away from all this. Set you up with enough money to live comfortably forever. Or you can stay and accept my direct protection. It was a choice between a gilded cage and a dangerous freedom. Inside the ballroom, things were unfolding quickly. She saw two of Minjun's men speaking quietly with Mr. Sterling. Then they approached Jessica. There was no scene, no shouting. They simply escorted her away. Walter, the bartender, caught Chloe's eye through the glass and gave her a slow, deliberate nod of respect. He had seen the shift. He understood. The betrayal, which had seemed so catastrophic minutes ago, was being erased as if it had never happened. Jessica had tried to ruin her life over a moment of perceived favor from a powerful man, and in doing so, had sealed her own fate. Chloe felt a pang, not of pity, but of a grim understanding of the justice that operated in Minjun's world. It was swift, silent, and absolute. She looked from the ballroom back to Minjun, who waited patiently for her answer. His presence was calm, but she could feel the immense, coiled power just beneath the surface. He wasn't just offering protection, he was offering a place at the center of the storm. For the first time, she felt the stirrings of something other than fear. It was a flicker of agency, a sense of her own history rising to meet the present. Her father hadn't just been a security guard, he had been a man of honor, a man who had inspired a lifelong debt from a king. That was her legacy. Chloe made her decision. It wasn't about the money or the revenge. It was about honoring the man her father was, and about refusing to be a victim any longer. "I'm not going to run away," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I'll stay." Minjun studied her for a long moment, a flicker of genuine respect in his eyes. He gave a single sharp nod. "Very well," he made a call, speaking in rapid, low Korean. Minutes later, as he escorted her back through the ballroom, the crowd parting for them like the Red Sea, they were met by a terrified Mr. Abernathy and an even more terrified Mr. Sterling. Minjun stopped in front of them, his demeanor placid, which was somehow more frightening than any overt display of anger. He looked at Sterling. "This man's employment here is terminated." Effective immediately, Sterling nodded frantically. "Of course, Mr. Ko. Consider it done." Abernathy opened his mouth to protest, but a cold look from Minjun silenced him instantly. Then, Minjun did something unexpected. He turned to Chloe. "He humiliated you. He assaulted you. What happens to him is your decision." All eyes were on her. The power was hers now. She could destroy this man who had made her life a living hell. She could demand retribution, inflict the same humiliation he had so freely dealt to her. She looked at Abernathy's pathetic, trembling form, the arrogance stripped away to reveal a weak, frightened man. And she felt nothing. Revenge felt empty. "I don't want him hurt," she said, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "I just want him gone. And I want Mr. Sterling to review the hotel's policies for how it treats its service staff. No one should be treated the way I was." Her response hung in the air. It was not the vengeful demand of a victim, but the strategic, merciful command of a leader. It was a move that looked beyond personal satisfaction to systemic change. Minjun's lips curved into a genuine, admiring smile. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less dangerous. He had tested her, and she had shown him not weakness, but a different kind of strength. A strength rooted in compassion and integrity. He placed a light hand on the small of her back. "Let's go," he said softly. "You don't belong here anymore." He guided her toward the main entrance, away from the gasps and whispers, leaving the ruins of her old life behind them. The transition was jarring, like stepping from a black and white film into a world of vibrant, overwhelming color. One moment she was in the suffocating confines of a shared, run-down apartment. The next she was waking up in a penthouse suite where the windows were not just panes of glass, but entire walls that offered a breathtaking panorama of the city. Minjun had given her space, a quiet place to process the seismic shift in her reality. He sent clothes, not extravagant gowns, but simple, elegant pieces that felt like a second skin. He sent books.
He gave her time.
A few days later, he came to see her. He found her on the balcony, the silver locket resting against a simple cashmere sweater. He didn't bring guards, he came alone. He brought 2 cups of tea and sat opposite her at a small table. For a while, they just watched the city breathe below them. "My father spoke of yours often," Minjun said, breaking the comfortable silence. He said David had a quiet strength, that he could see the truth of a person just by looking at them. "He sees the same in you." Chloe wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "I never knew him. Not really. He was just
Dad."
He worked long hours. He was tired a lot. But he was always kind. "Kindness is not a weakness," Minjun said, his eyes fixed on her. "In my world, it is the rarest and most valuable currency." He began to tell her stories, not just of her father's bravery, but of the intricate web of alliances, rivalries, and codes that defined his own life. He spoke of the Ko Syndicate not as a criminal enterprise, but as a kingdom, with its own laws and its own form of justice. He was not justifying it, but explaining it. He was showing her the map of the world she had chosen to enter. As he spoke, Chloe found herself drawn not to the power he wielded, but to the man burdened by it. She saw the loneliness in his eyes, the immense weight of a legacy he had not chosen but had been born into. There was a profound sense of duty in him, a quiet honor that mirrored the stories he told of her father. "Why are you telling me all this?" she asked. "The pact is for protection. You don't owe me your secrets. The pact is a debt," he corrected gently. "What I am offering you is a partnership. My father's promise was to protect your bloodline. My choice is to invite you to stand beside me. Your judgment," he said, nodding toward the memory of the ballroom. "Your compassion, that is a strength I need." In his world of shadows and steel, her light was not something to be extinguished, but something to be valued. The space between them, once filled with intimidation and mystery, was now charged with a different kind of energy, one of mutual respect, of a deep and unexpected connection. He was the most dangerous man she had ever met, and yet she had never felt safer. In the weeks that followed, Chloe's transformation was quiet but profound. It wasn't about the clothes or the luxurious surroundings. It was an internal shift, a settling into her own skin.
Minjun became her tutor, her guide.
He taught her about his business, the legitimate and the other. He showed her how power worked, not just in the boardroom, but in the hidden alleys of the city. He never hid the ugliness from her, but he also showed her the good they could do, the communities they protected, the people they supported. He valued her perspective, her innate sense of right and wrong, which often served as a moral compass in his gray world. The soft romance that bloomed between them was unspoken, growing in the quiet moments. It was in the way he'd watch her as she read, the way he'd bring her tea without asking, the way his presence would instantly calm the lingering anxieties from her past life. For Chloe, it was the way he listened, truly listened, to her opinions, and the way he looked at her not as a debt to be paid, but as a person to be cherished. One evening, they stood on the penthouse balcony, the same one where he had first told her about the locket. She was no longer the timid waitress in a cheap uniform. She wore a simple, dark blue dress, her hair styled naturally, her posture confident. She looked like she belonged there, not because of the setting, but because of the quiet strength that now radiated from her. "Are you ever afraid?" she asked him, looking out at the endless city lights. "Every day," he admitted, his voice a low murmur beside her. "I'm afraid of failing my family, my people. Of becoming the monster my enemies believe I am." He turned to her, his expression vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "Now, I am afraid of failing you." Chloe reached out and placed her hand on his arm. His suit was made of the finest material, but beneath it, she could feel the tension, the coiled strength of the man. "You haven't," she said softly. "You gave me a choice. You gave me a voice. You showed me who my father was. You gave me back my legacy." He covered her hand with his own, his thumb gently stroking her skin. The simple touch was more intimate than any kiss. "That legacy comes with a price." "My world is dangerous, Chloe." She met his gaze without flinching, her own eyes reflecting the city lights. So was mine, she replied, a wry smile touching her lips. Poverty is its own kind of violence. Humiliation is its own kind of cage. I've been fighting my whole life. The only difference is, now, I'm not fighting alone, a new chapter was beginning. She was not a damsel in distress, not a Mafia princess. She was the daughter of a hero, a woman of integrity, and the chosen partner of a king. The waitress they said no man would ever choose had not been chosen. She had been recognized. And in recognizing her own worth, she had found not just a new life, but her true self. The future was uncertain, shrouded in shadows and intrigue, but for the first time, Chloe wasn't afraid of the dark. She was ready to command it,